Hi there, Mark here again. Today I'm going to start building my TT02 chassis. This is for my wonderful Ford GT Mk2 body. This is how far I've got with that. That's the body all done. I've got a video coming up of how I did that, but before that I need to get the chassis completed. So obviously this is going to be running on the road, and I thought I'd share with you the little mods and changes that I'm going to make to the chassis to try and hopefully make it perform that little bit better than the stock setup. So the main thing with these mods that I'm going to do, apart from the shocks which are a little more expensive, is these are all really cheap, and some of them don't cost anything, so they're all I think less than about 10 UK pounds. The shocks were over 20, but I think that's pretty much the price that you're going to have to pay to get some kind of oil-filled shocks, but we'll talk about those later. So these are the bits I've got. What I'll do is I'll go through the build and focus on each of the little mods I'm doing, and I'm going to explain what the mod is and what I think the benefits of that mod are. So if you're following along with the video, you could mix and match, choose which of these mods you think might suit your build, and hopefully at least one of these mods will be of some use or interest to you. So let's crack on with it. Okay, so starting at step 3, the first mod I'm going to make is to swap out the spur gear. It shows here fitting the standard 70th spur. So I've got this hop up option, you can see the option there, which is the high speed gear set, 68th spur gear. And the reason I'm going to use this is because this will give me, it's going to give me some higher gear ratios and a little bit more top speed. So that's going to go in as follows. So the first thing we need to do is fit this alloy carrier onto this spur with the 4 screws provided. So straight on to the next mod, which is recommended here in the instructions for the high speed gear set, is to swap out the plastic bushings, which are these, for a set of metal bearings. And I do recommend you get the whole set for the kit, so we can totally replace all of these. There's several reasons, main one being that you will never get as smooth a running with the bushings as you will with the bearings. They create more friction, they wear out pretty quickly, and obviously the more they wear, the more vibration you're going to get and the more resistance. So yeah, you're going to be smoother and faster with a set of metal bearings, plus they'll last a hell of a lot longer. So to fit the high speed gear, what we need to do is get your shaft here, which is C5, put on the first 1150 bearing, then you need your aluminium spacer. You've got your small pin or shaft which goes through that hole. Simply take your spur gear, and we need to fit that shaft or pin into the groove in the carrier. Your second 1150 bearing, and your GB2 bevel gear goes on the end. So that's the one done, the one end. Straight into step 4 of my next recommended mod, which is this hop up TT02 aluminium propeller shaft. You can see the numbers, and that's this little beauty here. And yeah, this is going to replace the plastic prop shaft. And obviously the reason for this is bigger, bulkier. It's got more rotating mass. It's flexible, and it will actually twist under load. So straight away replacing it with one of these will give you basically a smoother running TT02. You can replace these C5 parts with aluminium cups that go with this, but to save money, you can see that these do fit perfectly. So I think you might get a little bit of an advantage with the aluminium ones, a bit tougher maybe, but these work okay in my experience. So yes, save a few quid. We're going to go with the original ones. So put your 1150 bearings on and your other bevel gear, and pop each end on like so, and straight to step 5, which is going to be putting it in the chassis. So just drop it in place, make sure the bearings, you need to put the bearings in the bearing carriers in the chassis like so. It should spin round nice and freely. You notice I didn't put in this part D15, and the reason for that is it doesn't really do much. except for when it's in place, the parts that stick out either side restrict the movement of your steering mechanism and quite drastically reduces the amount of steering lock that you get. So there's another little tip, just costs you nothing, but if you want a bit more steering, then you can leave that part out. I'm just going to clamp the front down with this part D2, which it says to fix into place with the self-tapping 10mm screws. Straight into one of my other little tips is to replace those with stainless steel hex head screws, cap screws. Now these are machine screws, they're not self-tappers, but they do work perfectly into the plastics. I've tried them many times before in other kits, no problems at all. The reason for using these, again, dirt cheap. I think enough screws to finish the whole kit cost me a couple of quid last time, I think £1 or £2. And as you can see, the reason for using these are because you use a hex wrench, and the fit, the mechanical fit into the head is much better than a crosshead screw. So when you're doing maintenance in the future or rebuilds, you've got less chance of actually slipping with the driver. Also, they're stainless, so they're not going to rust at all, and stainless is a lot harder, it's a lot tougher than the mild steel of the screws that come with the kit. So yeah, definitely worth putting those in because they're so cheap. So we'll just get this fitted. Okay, that's that done. And finally, another tip while we're at it. You might be thinking, what is that mess that's all around that webbing at the front? That's a bit of hot glue that I've just filled the gaps in this webbing with. The reason for this is many times I've had bits of dirt and debris, little sticks and so on, flick up from the drive wheels and they get caught down those gaps, and it jams up the actual steering mechanism when that's in place, and this stops that from happening. So you don't have to use hot glue, you can use putty, you can use foam, anything that basically just stops things getting caught around this area, which is where the steering mechanism will go eventually. So that's another little tip. Step 6 is making up the differential gears. There's 2 of them to do, and the only difference I've done here to how it shows in the manual is to use Tamiya AW grease instead of the grease that's provided, and this will stiffen up the diff quite well. This stuff is really good stuff, it's really sticky. If you can't get this, use any kind of really thick grease you can get. I always use a brush to apply it because it gets everywhere and it doesn't come off. It's kind of like glue really. Yes, so just apply that sparingly. Just finish off by putting the top bevel gear in. Again, I'm holding that with the output cup just so I don't get the grease all over my fingers. And when you turn it, then you really can feel and you can hear how tight that is now compared to how it would normally be. So why are we doing this? So the main function of a differential is to allow one wheel to turn faster than another. This is so that when we're going around a corner, the wheel that's on the outside of a corner will need to travel faster than the wheel on the inside, and that's what the differential allows. Now the downside is that it also allows one wheel to spin freely. So say if one of the wheels loses traction, it loses contact with the ground and starts to spin, all of the power will be sent from the differential to that one wheel that's spinning. Obviously this reduces traction, you're not getting traction to the other wheel that is touching the floor, reduces speed, and your car won't go as fast. So if we put this grease in, the AW grease, it tightens up and it allows some of the power when one wheel is spinning to go to the other wheel, and it's what we call a limited slip differential. So you get that kind of limited slip effect by using the grease. So that's both the diffs built up, and I've just popped them into place. I've put the bearings on, just drop the one in the front and the one in the rear. Make sure you get them the right way around. You can see this one points one way, the bevel gear's there, or the ring gear I should say, and it's on the opposite side at the back. And if you turn the shaft, you should get both diffs turning in the same direction. Okay, so I'm just going to follow the rest of the manual through now, which is fitted on the top arms I think, and the damper stays, and I'll come back at step 11, which is going to be my next upgrade or mod, which is the motor. So So on to the motor upgrade, and this is the one I've gone for. It's the Spur Eco Thrust 21 turn. You see the numbers there? And I suppose the obvious one and the easiest one to go for would be the Tamiya Sport Tune motor, give you a bit more performance. As on this build I'm trying to get the most performance and spending the least amount of money, I've gone for this one because the Sport Tune motor is about £25 in the UK, and this one, would you believe, is £9, and that was including the postage. And another reason for going for this one is that this thing spins at a rated 25,000 RPM. If you compare that to the Tamiya Sport Tuned, I think it's about 18,500. This thing spins a lot faster and therefore should give a lot more top speed. Well, that's the idea anyway, and as I say, it's a real good budget motor. I've used them before, and I've also used them on the Tamiya TT-02 ESC. I know it's not rated for a 21 turn, but I haven't had any problems. Also, they've managed to pull the same gearing as the stock motor, so I will be fitting the stock 22 tooth pinion on this one. And because I've got the high-speed gear set, we need to refer to this chart here, which shows for the 22 tooth pinion I need to put it in the 20 tooth pinion position, which is position E, as you can see there. So that's what I've done. If you can see in this light, attached it there to the 20 tooth markings. I'm just going to loosely fit the pinion and then set that in the right position when I get it into the chassis, which I'm going to do next. Okay, so it just slots in there, and what you want to do is get that pinion right in the centre of the spur gear, as you can see, and then we can nip up that Allen screw. So all I need to do is get the screws into this and then get the cover in place, and I'll get on with the next few steps off camera until we get to the next upgrade, which I'm going to do, which is to the steering links. Oh, okay then, as the fitting of the dampers comes first in the manual before the steering, I'll do that upgrade first. So yeah, obviously this is the standard shock. It calls it a damper, and as you know, dampers are supposed to slow the movement of the shock absorber due to the spring. And as you can see, the standard one, I've just put this one together to show you. Yeah, look at the movement in that. It's a very sloppy fit, and there's no damping whatsoever. It's just, as I call, a pogo stick. So those are going to make your TT02 bounce all over the place. And the solution to that is to fit some oil shocks. Now I think that any oil shocks whatsoever are going to be better than these standard shock absorbers, as they're called. And I ordered these Fast Tracks ones. You can see the number there, and they seem to tick all the boxes. Just get them out the packet, and the shocks themselves are really well specified. As you can see, at each end we've got like a brass ball joint which allows the shock to move in all directions, which is good. It's got a knurled adjuster there, and we can adjust the preload kind of infinitely really just by turning that up and down, so that's cool. It's a full aluminium construction, and yeah, I like the fact that they're kind of dual rate springs as well. These are about £13 for a pair, but to be honest with you, I can't recommend these exact shocks because I had a problem. I don't know, you're not probably going to be able to see here, but there's a seal in there, and the seal isn't held in very well with the circlip that's provided, and it was kind of jamming on a couple of the shocks. So I've spent quite a long time making my own solution, which was a circlip out of much thicker wire, which I had to bend round and create myself. It took a bit of time, so yeah, that's a downside. But any other oil-filled shocks like the Tamiya CVA Super Minis, 55mm long, are going to be better than the standard one. So definitely put these on. Benefits being the car's going to bounce around a lot less, you'll get more traction and more grip, which obviously equates to better handling. So there you can see there's the front ones fitted, and they do feel nice and smooth, and I think these are going to work pretty well now that I've sorted them out. So to fit them, all that I did, as you can see here, is I've put an Allen bolt through, and then I put a nut on the back, and that's to stop the thin edge of that brass ball joint digging into the plastic, because if it digs in, obviously it's going to stop that movement. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use the outside hole of the top mount there, and the top hole in the bottom on the wishbone or A-arm. So yeah, I'm just going to get those screwed on like that, and that'll be all the 4 shocks done. So on step 24, which is the steering linkage, and this is my next mod. The standard setup is basically consists of these plastic kind of links and these little plastic ball joints, which are B11s. You have to force these into the holes, and I've got to say that in the past I've had a lot of problems with these binding. If you tighten up the screw too tight slightly, it'll expand the plastic, it'll start jamming and grabbing, your steering gets all notchy, and really there's no adjustment whatsoever. All these links are fixed and you can't adjust the steering at all. So my next little tip is to go for the hop-up turnbuckle tie rod set. It does say for the TT01, but trust me, this will fit the TT02. So we'll just get this out. So in here, as you can see, you get metal ball joints to replace those horrible plastic balls, and you get the actual turnbuckle rod itself, which allows you to wind in and wind out the length of those tie rods. There's a tiny little instruction sheet just showing you how to put the ball ends, each of these, onto those rods, and then how to fit it. So we'll just go through this now. I'll fit this onto the TT02. So as you can see there, here's your steering linkage. Got the brass ball joint on there, and then you've got the silver or the steel one onto the steering knuckle. And then what you need to do is just get that little turnbuckle and pop the ball joints over, and just get the other one done. Okay, as you can see, now we can adjust the toe in or toe out of the wheels at the front there, and these ball joints, as I said, they operate a lot more smoothly and freely than those plastic balls. So yeah, that's a really nice hop up, I think. And just to finish this off, I've made myself another adjustable arm, which is going to go across here onto the servo. It's going to replace the standard plastic one that also came with those plastic ball joints, and all I used for this was a pair of spare ball ends, 5mm ball ends. You can use the shock bottoms like this if you want, and then you can get the steel bar, threaded bar, just by cutting the head off one of the Tamiya bolts, and that gives you the shaft that goes in between there. So that's another little tip. So with this I can centre up the steering so it runs true without having to use the trim settings on the transmitter, which is always good if you're swapping transmitters from car to car. You put it in neutral, and obviously this should now, once it's set up, run straight without having to use that trim. So that's another good little tip. So you can see I've got all the links connected up now. Let me just about see the one on the servo there, and just fire it up quickly. Here you can see it's all moving nice and smoothly. It's much freer moving and smoother than the standard setup, and like I say, we can now adjust the toe in and toe out, and we can centre up the servo with this link. So I've got all the electronics installed. We're nearly finished now. One of my last little tips is this is the cover that's supposed to go over the motor. Holds the switch, and it's got a little cover there. You could put a fan on that, which would be a good thing, but if not, leave it off, because it will just make the motor hotter. And get a cheap aluminium heatsink like I've got here. I think this was £4, this thing, and that will keep your motor a lot cooler, and a cooler motor will last longer and run faster. So yeah, there's another little tip, and also it looks quite trick too, I think. So we're all wired up. As I said, the steering is nice and smooth moving, just what we wanted. And if we just have a listen to the car run, it's nice and smooth running, so hopefully this should go well out on the road. So the last thing I've got to do now is get the wheels on, so the last little tip coming up. So my last little tip, if you've stuck with me this long, is to put some foam in your tyres. Simple reason for this. This is a stock road wheel with a road tyre on it, obviously, a slick, and there's nothing inside this tyre. If I press on there, you can probably see it just goes straight down to the rim inside. So it doesn't take any pressure to push that in. So obviously this part of the tyre is not going to be putting any pressure on the road surface, which means it won't have any grip. I think basically you'll be running on these sidewalls, which are the only thing that's got any kind of restriction when you press them in. So if you look at one I've put some foam in, I don't know, I'll press on it, but honestly it moves hardly at all now. Just a little bit, enough to give it a little bit of compliance. Obviously you don't want it solid, but yeah, it's much firmer all the way around, and hopefully you'll get more grip across the width of the tyre. You can buy the Tamiya foam inserts. They're about £5, I think, £5 for a set. But I've got some kind of medium density foam here, so I've just cut out a piece, and all you need to do is feed it inside the tyre all the way around, squish it right in, and yeah, put it over the rim, and job's a good one. That's my last little tip for more grip. So there she is. That's my modified TT02 chassis, all finished and ready for the road. Looking forward to getting the Ford GT Mk2 body on it and giving it a test. Hopefully you'll follow along, where we'll do some speed tests and some road runs. And like I said at the beginning, they're all cheap and easy to do mods. I hope you found at least one or two of them of some kind of use. Thanks for watching. Bye.